Welcome to episode 244 of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm our host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Rob, how are you doing?
Doing okay, getting by. You have any news you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so. Nothing at the moment. Weather's nice here, though, so that's at least something.
That's good, because you had, snow a week ago, didn't you?
Yeah, it's been snowing every other week for a few weeks. Sorry, not every other week. Every Friday for a few weeks, and sunny the other times. But it's much nicer right now.
Did you move to Canada?
No, this is normal Colorado weather for us in the spring. We don't know if it's going to be rain or snow anytime between March and May, basically.
Right, Canada, you said. Yes.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Okay, well, at the top of every episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. We got this comment on the website for the episode from 2 weeks ago with John Turner, your cousin, saying from Bob McNaughton, Rob, you didn't ask the question that I think was on the mind of many parents of young children when the Turners were reminiscing about their childhood. What were their influences? Was there a teacher or family member in particular who was a mentor to them? What did the person do that encouraged the extraordinary curiosity and creativity of this remarkable pair? Maybe Jason could fill in the answer on a later episode. So, yeah, you got an answer for that, Jason?
Now, Rob?
Sure, yeah.
So I did chat with John about this a little bit, and I guess I feel like I should clarify this. Yes, he does generally go by Jonathan professionally, but, I've been a family member of his for my entire life, so I just call him John. He and I, it's as far as we can reconstruct the history, basically, his dad thought that having a TI-99 was a good idea. He bought one and told my dad about it. My dad then bought one. They are brothers. That's the family relationship there. And both of then our older brothers, who are approximately the same age, played around on it and did artistic things with it because they are both more artistic than they are programmers. Mm-hmm. And John and I were both influenced by that, played around a little bit on it. And then I got excited about typing in the basic programs that would be in the back of magazines back in the day. And John told me he tried doing the same thing when I told him that I was doing it, but he got frustrated with typing in those basic programs. So he didn't really program for several years until he decided sometime in middle school that he was interested in things again. And he had moved on to compiled languages. He's in Pascal, he's playing with assembly, and I'm basically still just playing with BASIC and QBasic and whatever for GW Basic for all those middle school, high school years until we were hanging out again right before college started, and he taught me assembly language, and we learned some C and C++ together and that kind of thing. So it was just the way we figure it was having families that had the, I guess, means and interest in investing what was a lot of money at the time to have a family computer, and then having influence from each other, basically, and sharing ideas back and forth over the years.
It's very cool. I do wonder if, younger generations are not going to have experiences like that at all because, we have an iPad and computers in the house, but you're not programming on that. Kids are playing Roblox and Minecraft and stuff like that all the time.
That's what Minecraft is kind of like programming, right?
It can be, yeah, and you can do more with it, I think, in some versions of Minecraft, yeah.
But you don't boot up into a basic environment and basically have to do some kind of programming to load a game. I mean, effectively, that's what you're doing. That's not the same, no.
Okay, well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes or subscribe on YouTube. Joining us again today is Tony Van Eerd. Tony has been coding for well over 30 years and hopefully coding well for some of that, mostly in graphics, video, film, and broadcast at Inscriber and Adobe, writing low-level pixel, high-level UI, threading, and everything else. He now enables painting with light at Christie Digital. He is on the C++ committee, and he is a ninja and a Jedi. Tony, welcome back to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
We have to spend some time on your ninja and Jedi qualifications.
No, you can't disclose these things. You're not even supposed to say you're a ninja.
But you did.
Right? Yeah, wow. I'm an upper level ninja. They don't know. They can't complain about me anymore. Been doing it too long. They're like, you're not supposed to. That's not the ninja way. And I'm like, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, I guess if they say anything, you would just take them out, right?
Yeah, if you could find them. You can never find those ninjas when you're looking for them. That's the way it is to be a ninja. I don't know. It's what do people put on their bios? Like none of it ever makes sense. So, I'm a ninja and a Jedi, but
We've had, I don't know either. I always just copy and paste the bio from my last talk, basically, because I'm like, I don't know. Have I done anything new? No, not really.
all I do is increment that number of how many years I've been doing this.
Yeah.
It's
Really?
just gone up to 30, yeah. Like last time I said 25.
Does that make you feel old then?
I am old. It's not feeling old. No, I don't know. I don't. The beard makes me feel old, but yeah, it is what it is. I can pretend I was coding since I don't even know if that year. I don't know when I started why I think it's 30 years because I was coding in high school. I don't know if I counted that. It's probably like 30 years of. Oh, it is. It's probably 30 years of professional coding. That's kind of scary.
Wow. Okay, so since we just, I gave my little story here about my early computer use. What was your first computer?
That's a good question. We did have the original Pong, by the way. I remember my uncle got us the original Pong, like hardware,
Yeah.
game. We had no other like gaming or anything. And in grade 10, we had computers at school, came into school, it's kind of hilarious. My brother's 2 years older than me, so he was in grade 12 when computers showed up at high school, and he never got into it. So to this day, he is still like, not as comfortable around computers. And he says it's like that 2 year gap. I got introduced to computers in grade 10, and he just didn't. Right. So, we forked our directions. We learned computers in grade 10. And I remember taking this course where they taught like what a bus is and all the hardware and the history. And the whole time in the class, I'm like, can you just tell me how to program? Like I saw someone else in the computer lab do the 10 go to 20 or, print out something. And one of those, there was an adventure game of like you're standing here and there's a window and there's, pointing to the west and one of those things. I'm like, how do I do that? And so eventually about halfway through the year, I just got a book from the teacher. I was like, give me a book on coding. And I went off in the summer and wrote Mastermind in BASIC for the pet computer or Commodore or whatever thing we had at school. I had no computer at home. So I had the folded printout paper with the holes down the side, right? A big, long stack of that. And I wrote it out in one long sheet of paper. And it was, 6 feet long in pencil. And it kept track of, it did your score and it used symbols because there was no color. Like if you know the Mastermind game, it's like, the computer guesses, randomly picks like 5. It's not supposed to be computer, but, 2-player. You pick some symbols and then the other person has to guess and you give them hints a certain way. I had to use symbols because there was no color, but by the time I got back to school, the game would keep track of your total scores over, the history of you playing. You could say how many, it's supposed to be like 5 colors, but you could say how many symbols you wanted to use, and a bunch of other stuff. It just tracked everything. And I went back to school and I typed it in with 2 fingers, right? Because that's, 2-finger typing, grade 10. And I remember it's like I spent like an hour or two, and I remember like getting tired. I leaned back and I kicked the power cord out of the computer. It was all gone, right? And this is on like you couldn't even save this stuff. Like you'd save to tape or whatever, right? So I typed it all in again, and then I ran it, and it had one bug in it. And I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? I'm looking at the code. I'm looking at the code on my paper, back and forth. And I'm like, oh, I've mixed up X and Y. And I can still kind of picture the code. All my variables, like what the score was or how many things, it was all X, Y, Z, W. There was no variable names, right? It was all just because I was into math. I'm still consider myself more a mathematician than a programmer. And on paper, I think that program had no bugs. I had one typo when I typed it in, and it was bug-free, and, well, been all downhill since then. But my first program was, but, it was bug-free because I typed it, did it out by hand over the summer, and then all summer long, like every day that I looked at it, I would look over it again, run it in my head, fix it. It's like people who talk about punch cards who say it has to work because you send in your punch cards. Like Kate Gregory tells that of how you'd send punch cards to Toronto and get them back, and they'd say, yeah, good, yes or no. That's all you got. It was like it failed or it didn't fail. So you had to know whether your code was going to work or not. Right? People with compilers nowadays and stuff like that tell them.
Spoiled kids.
Yeah. And you get the little squiggly line saying, don't even try to compile this. It's not going to work.
So do you find that though experience affects the way that you program today?
I wonder. It might. Like, I do think I do think I code. I bug people about this all the time. I just say, well, why didn't you write it right the first time? Because everyone's always like, oh, the first one's always wrong. And I'm like, well, why don't you just write it right the first time? That's what I do. But I know I spend more time thinking than I do coding, right? And I kind of picture,
Sorry,
I kind of picture things before I write a line of code. And everyone's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I am just staring into space for a while and then be like, okay, this is how it's going to go. And then here's how it's going to lay out. And I don't know. But I also think that's, again, it's I did pure math in university and stuff. So I tend to think abstractly. I can jump back and forth. Like a good mathematician has to be like, here's an example, and here's the abstraction, and here's the example, here's the abstraction. So when I hire students from university, for a while I had I basically told them that if you were a computer science student and you're in the pure math club at the university, which is, why are you in the pure math club? It's like as nerdy as you can get, but you're a computer science student, you're in the pure math club, I'll give you a free interview. I don't want to see your resume or anything, because a pure math student thinks abstractly. That doesn't mean they're a good programmer, but if they're also in computer science and a pure math student, then I found I didn't do this because I have a bias for math. Maybe I do, but I did it because after a while I realized, and it wasn't just me, it was the people I was working with. We realized all our best students were, it's like you do the Venn diagram. What do they have in common? And they're like, oh, they're all in the pure math club. So we're like, okay, tell your friends to show up. So that's what we did. I don't know.
Okay.
I do think the way people think is how they code, right? And if you try to tell someone to code the way you do and not the way they do, it doesn't work very well. So everyone's going to code the way they think, and that's fine.
I find personally the older I get, I was not in the pure math club. I didn't enjoy math really, but the older I get, the less time I spend typing.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to start typing until I have a pretty good idea what my plan is.
Yep. And some people like to go the other way, right? They just want to feel like I need to get started, so they get started.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Tony, we got a couple news articles to discuss. Feel free to comment on any of these, and we'll start talking more about what you've been up to, okay?
Sure.
All right, so this first one is an announcement on the Microsoft Visual C++ blog from Cy, who we've had on the show numerous times. And this is about a online-only conference that Microsoft is going to host in a week, Thursday, April 30th. It's pure virtual C++ 2020. Very good title.
I don't even know if the conference is any good. I want to go just because Cy came up with that title. It's great.
Yeah. But it looks pretty cool. They got, 8 talks by mostly Microsoft employees, but there is also one here by
John Heed.
By John Heed Manid, yeah, which is pretty cool. On designing text encodings, yeah.
Text.
I don't have this visceral reaction to text like some people do. I did see
Which
a
means
recent
you haven't done it that much?
I guess I probably haven't done it enough, no.
Yeah.
I saw a recent bug report on a project I'm involved in that said, or it was it was on a bug report, as a pull request that said, address double click issue on Mac. And I'm like, yep, that's why I don't like GUI programming right there.
I used to work at Adobe, so text processing is, Unicode, all that stuff. I knew that stuff. And I for a long time, I just wouldn't admit knowing it because then someone's going to ask you about it. And now I can just say, well, I've forgotten. So I can say I used to know it. It's not fun.
I have a friend who's intentionally leaving DevOps off of his resume right now just because he doesn't want those calls.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Okay, next one we have is Modern Cpp Starter, which is this project on GitHub, and it's basically just a template for if you want to create a new C++ project using CMake, and it's all hooked up to do CI, client format, all these other great things that you should have in your C++ project if you're starting new today. And I saw, Jason, you actually have something similar too that you just updated, right?
Yeah, yes, I do. Yeah, but we don't need to talk about my project. We can talk about his. Yes.
Well, what did you think of this one?
I mean, it looks good. It's like most of the things that I care about. It's got all of the tools enabled, and I'm trying to find the list of warnings that he has on here, or he or she. So I don't know who actually worked on this. But yeah, I mean, I'm always a fan of this kind of thing that helps people get up and running faster with C++ tools,
Yeah, I looked at it too, and it was just like, I'm most just because of what the work I do and places I've worked, I'm mostly on Visual Studio. So CMake is another one of these things I shudder at, but everyone, it is the best of the worst kind of thing. Everyone hates all build tools, so CMake seems to be winning. But I looked at that and I was like, if I had to start something new and not in the Windows world, I would not know where to start. So like having a place there, which is like, hey, start right here. Here's all the pieces. And I'd be like, hey, I could use that. And people probably look at me thinking, oh, you're supposed to know these things. I'm like, no, I don't know. I build systems and things like that is another thing that I avoid purposely.
Yeah, I spend most of my time in Windows Visual Studio as well. Although I will say, they have added lots of great support for CMake. So I'm guessing if you wanted to, you could do a file new project using this sort of template and be happy in Visual Studio using their CMake support.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and then last thing we have, another conference announcement is Meeting C++ 2020. It's going to be November 12th to 14th, and I think the keynotes are not announced yet, but call for speakers is out, right, as well? Yes.
Yes. And what makes this stand out at the moment is Jens is planning to have a regular conference right now.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully, we're going to be approaching normalcy by then.
Yeah, he has to start, right? Like, it takes so much planning to put out a conference. He has to start now with the assumption of, things will be better. And if he doesn't start now, it's not going to happen. It's unfortunately, I'm almost guaranteed to miss that conference. I would, especially this year when we're in this drought of conferences. I really want to go. It's the same time as a committee meeting. So if I'm traveling at all, I'll probably go to the committee meeting. Which talk to Jens about that, about like, hey, you're going to miss all these regular speakers. He's like, that is great. I don't want to have just the same speakers over and over again. He gets a different, another good crowd of speakers, because not people on the committee are not necessarily good speakers either. So it looks like I think I told him already. It's like either no one's going to show up because things won't be back to normal yet, or it's going to be packed because we're all dying to go. We're all starving for a conference. Yeah. So I hope it works out great.
Yeah.
So one thing that you should add to your resume, Tony, since you just said not all committee members are great speakers, is the height of the stack of awards that you have won from C++ now. What is, if you were to stack them up, it's probably at least a foot, right?
You know what, though? I think that Connor guy, who showed up, and they came up with new awards, and it's like a total, they've now, I think it's a Illuminati or something. Connor won like 5 awards in 1 year because the one award's called Your Name is Connor or something. I don't know. But they had like the new speaker award. I can't win that one, things like that. So, and also, I'm sure you're only bringing this up because I still didn't win Best Speaker that year that you won Best Speaker because...
Yeah. Well, no, that's not, it actually isn't why I was bringing that up, but it is true. But you actually have won many awards from speaking.
I guess so.
He has. He's downplaying it. He has. Depending on who you talk to, the awards at C++ now are known as the Tonys.
That's the problem. Now they're known as the Connors. They were known as the Tonys, but that's why I was excited to go back and reclaim my throne, but I have to wait another year.
Yeah.
Well, since we were talking about your talks, Tony, when we last had you on, it was right after your first Postmodern C++ talk. And you've given a few more versions of it since then, which are always popular, including one at the Prague Avast meetup. How do the different iterations since the first talk differ?
I don't know if anyone will notice the difference between the 3 talks, other than I rhyme it now. the talk, I don't know why. This is a weird. I shouldn't even tell people. It's better to have them be surprised, but. That Postmodern C++ is the talk that was my best attempt at getting the best talk award that Jason stole from me. Jason and Ben, right? I think.
Yes, it was Ben. Yes, you can blame Ben more than me, I think.
Yeah. So I gave that talk once, but people really I don't like giving the same talk twice because I've done it and I don't do it as well the second time because basically I'm bored, and it's not even that I'm bored. It's that most of my talks are written like way too much % the night before. So it's like the 2 days before I barely sleep and I pack in my whole talk. So they're all fresh in my head. So if I give the talk a second time, I end up looking at my own slides going, what was I trying to say here? And I just can't give a talk well, and I look at my slides before and say, okay, remember what this was all about, and then I get up there and I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I don't like to give the same talk twice, but people were like, oh, that was a really good talk, you should do it again at CppCon. And I was like, yeah, I should. I'll have to change it though. And I remember going for walks at night thinking, how am I going to change this talk? And then somehow I had this idea of like, I'll rhyme it like Dr. Seuss. And so every night I went for a walk and I looked at slides on my phone and said, well, I've got all my slides done. I know what I want to say. Just make it rhyme like Dr. Seuss. So if you see the talks past my first one, it rhymes. It sounds like Dr. Seuss. And if you go on YouTube, you will see the people complaining that they're like, I couldn't get past the first 5 minutes because the rhyming, just gets in the way, which is true. Some people love it and some people hate it. That's a good sign with my talks. So I gave it one more time at Prague, which was a committee meeting. Hannah organized the committee meeting in Prague. It was just the last committee meeting that happened. And then she also organizes this meetup. And so at the meetup, she got a couple other kind of unknown speakers, Bjarne Strustrup, Herb Sutter. Maybe you heard of those two guys. And me, we all gave talks. And Hannah's basically like, this is my favorite talk. Please do Postmodern again. So I did it a third time. And every time I do it, I change it. And I actually tried to not rhyme it too much so that it's actually intelligible. So this last version might be the best version. It's also the most condensed version. I kind of shortened it up and tried to. It's kind of weird because I still don't know what the point of my talk is. But every time I give it, I realize different aspects of it that are like, oh, this was my point. I'm trying to get, because it really is. It's just like layers of meta and stuff. And and even after the talk, someone asked me a question about it. I'm like, no, okay, here's the real point of the talk. And then I'm like, wait a second. Every time I'm going to have to do the talk again, because I do actually at the end of the talk explain, because I realize people aren't going to get the points. So I explain the points over again. It's like telling a joke and then explaining the joke, and then you're like, it's not funny anymore. But I think if I ever do the talk again, I will again explain, like, here's why I used humor in the talk. I'm going to like really wreck it by explaining humor and why I used humor and what the meaning of the humor was. But it's kind of like this. Maybe this is the talk I will forever change every time. I'll just like over the years, it'll just the one talk I go back to, and you have to watch them all to get the full experience. This is what I should really do, is like plant. Maybe I've already done this. Let's just pretend I've already done this. Plant certain things in the talk so that you don't actually get the full true meaning of it. Like there's hidden messages in the talk, and you won't see the end of the hidden message until. Yeah. You have to watch the 7th version before you get the full true meaning of the talk. Yeah, edit out anything where I said maybe I should have. That's what I did. Yeah,
it's like the, I don't remember, what is it? They called The Treasure, The Secret. It's The Secret. I think it's called The Secret. It's a series of novels or something, and there's a bunch of clues in them, and then people are going around the world trying to find where these hidden clue boxes are. I've seen a couple of TV shows about it. And it went like 20 years without any of them being found until like a year ago. Then they found like 2 more again. That's the layers and depths of your talks. In 20 years, people will discover the true meaning of your talks.
It would be nice if someone eventually understood my talk. So you do kind of give talks hoping that someone will know what you're talking about, or get a aha moment. So yeah, it would be nice if someone's like, oh, I understood what you were trying to say.
I will say, though, for my part, for real, over the last few years, I quote that talk every single time I give a class on best practices. Because you had a slide up, as I recall it, that was, how many times must you see a block of code before you put it in a function? Yep. And I propose that to my students every single time to make them think about code organization.
Yeah, and how many give you the right answer?
In a class of 20, probably about 2 on average. But then once I show them more like, hey, look, if you actually use functions to decompose your problem, you can make readable code. And I lead them to more examples, then I tend to get more students going, oh, I see that now. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another talk called the Chief Weapon of Programming, which, yes, is a Monty Python, whatever that skit's called. The Spanish Inquisition.
I don't know.
It's our chief weapon is, and they have more than one chief weapon, and it's supposed to be one. It's a skit. And as I do that talk, I realized that and if I look back at some of my other talks, one of my only points I have is like, just write more functions. If you just wrote more functions, that's like, don't listen to anything else. Like here's the one takeaway, write a function there. Like that could have been a function. That part over there, that could have been a function. Oh, look, another function. And I'm doing it at work now in code review, and it's to the point of taunting my poor student that I have right now. I'm just like, oh, so like we could maybe move this and put it in a subroutine. What do you call these things? Like, and he's like, a function? Like, yeah, what a great idea. That's, But I'm pretty sure he's going to walk away, thinking I should put that in a function. And I'm like, okay, there, good. I've succeeded. Right? Sad that I have to pick on them to get that stuck in their head, but whatever.
Do you have people that complain, but that's just a small function. It's going to add too much overhead in calling it?
I don't have people at work. It's actually bad. Most of the people I work with don't ever complain about things I do, because they're like, oh, Tony, you're on the committee and blah, 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 blah. It's like they should, right? They should question. And every now and then someone will question me, but they're too often just accept me as dogma or something, which is bad. But yeah, when people are like, this is going to have overhead and all that, and even and getting a huge topic of exceptions or all these other things that cause overhead. Most of your code doesn't have to be fast, which isn't true for everyone, right? But it's true for the average application. And even people on the committee, I've said that to, and they just look at me funny. It's like, this is what C++ is all about. It's all about performance and everything. I'm like, no, not for me. C++ is about correctness. I can write more correct code if I constrain, the type system helps you constrain things. So I don't know where I started. I had a conclusion there somewhere. Where'd it go? The only thing I've seen with I've had in my career one person I coded with who I thought wrote too many functions. Every function was like 2 or 3 lines, and it called another function, and all it did was like check an input and call another function, and it was kind of a forest for the trees. I couldn't see what the code was doing. But beyond that, I'm just like if you made this small part, I mean, I always say if you have, well, it's in my one talk too. It's like if you search for code for the like step 1, you see the phrase step 1 in a function, and that means that function has like 4 or 5 steps because you had to break it up into steps. It's like, geez, like call the first function step 1. I don't really care what you call it. Just separate this out a little bit because it's too much. But like I said, people think a certain way. People who write long, straightforward functions, they're like, I want to see everything. I want to know what's going on. I've got this in my head, and I just need to, if you break up into functions, that means I have to think, I've lost my train of thought or something like that, which is true, right? That can happen. So, and part of the problem is a lot of those people who do that will gladly turn it into functions after they wrote it.
Right.
But then the pressure is to not spend any more time on it, right? So the function gets left because it works. You move on to the next thing. So, what can you do? But I try to, like, no one who's thinking, I just want the straightforward code. I don't want to have to think about functions. No one goes, I'm not going to call a stir copy. I'll write it myself. It's like functions you already know, you're happy to call. Right? So just pretend the function. I do this. That's the other one. I just did this last week. Someone asked me questions like, where do I get the name of the config file or something like that? And I'm like, there's a function for that. And he's like, what's the function called? I said, well, like guess. He's like, is it called like get config name or something? I said, yeah, that's probably it. And then he's like, how do I like load the file? Like, how do I read a file or something? I was like, there's probably a function called read file to string, whatever, right? And I said, just go look for those functions. And I know the functions don't exist, but it's like, just write your code as if those functions exist. and then like, he comes back a little while later. He's like, these functions don't exist. I'm like, yeah, I know. Have you written them yet? Like, but anytime you have a question of like, I need this answer. It's like, well, pretend that function exists and then go on your way to the real problem that you're trying to solve. I don't know.
I've been looking at a lot of code lately that I see something that at one point was probably relatively straightforward, and then clearly like they wanted to add logging in. So then there's like a logging message added in every single if block. And I'm looking at this code because I'm tasked with refactoring some of it at the moment. And I go, wait a minute, every single one of these if statements is exactly the same 4 lines. So I replaced 350 lines of code with 50 calls to a new function that I just created.
Wow.
It's quite a bit more readable and more maintainable at this point.
I actually had, once upon a time, I had to write a color picker, right? So you show the different spectrums, and it did HLS and HSV and all the different things. And this was a time back when, on a 386 or something, where function call overhead was bad, and this had to be fast, and actually, for unknown reasons, it had to dither the colors because it had to be a color picker that would work on 8-bit displays. So like how do you show a ramp of a spectrum of color when you only have 256 colors? So it dithered on the fly as it was doing its thing, but you're dithering knowing what when you dither an image, you're carrying around the delta error kind of thing, and you spread the error into the next lines. When you're dithering a ramp, where you know that you're going from red to blue or whatever, cyan to or HLS or whatever, I know what the next colors are going to be, so I can pre-compute sort of what the dither will be because I know where I am. In I don't have to carry stuff around and stuff. That code ended up with 200 for loops. Like it was all inline, like hand inlined for, because like HLS is 6 different quadrants. They all had to be written differently. And like 5 years later, someone replaced it with a function that for every pixel, call RGB to HLS or HLS to RGB, or like it was nothing. There was no code there. And I'm like, yeah, I know that's what I wanted to write, but it was the one time I was like, no, I have to write. I was basically hand unrolling loops and doing all this other crazy stuff. But I remember this. People are like, this. Sean Parent. When Sean Parent has the no raw loops is one of his sayings. I'm like, oh, and I've got this file over here. It's got 200 for loops in it, in one CPP file. Probably C file actually. It was that long ago, but.
These days, you'd have to put a comment at the top that says, no lint Sean Parent. And then,
yeah. That's when you made it, if you get a lint statement of your own. I guess the compiler has a man, the guy retires, and you already forget his name, Scott Myers, right? There's like Scott Myers as a
effective
compiler
C++.
setting. Yeah.
I guess before we move on from this topic, I would like to add that at one point, Matt Godbolt proved to me pretty effectively that any function call overhead from well-organized code that we're talking about, almost any of it can be eliminated with LTO, link time optimization. It does the right thing.
Yep.
It's good to know. We mentioned that you were a standards committee member. Is there anything you worked on that made into C++ 20 that we wanted to talk about?
I've got a few things here and there. There's the things that didn't make it in because of me.
Okay.
I shouldn't even bring up optional reference. I'm probably to blame for why that doesn't exist.
Yeah, we can just skip that one.
Yeah, it's a bad topic. Span doesn't have equal because of me, basically, which it's one of my better papers because I drew a flowchart diagram in ASCII. I'm always proud of the ASCII diagrams. But span is basically just a pointer plus a length that, so now I have a span of data. It doesn't own, it's spanning over a vector or something. It doesn't own the data, but spans over it. And then the question was, does equal mean that I'm pointing, like 2 pointers are equal if they point to the same place. They're not equal if they happen that the places they point to are equal. It's shallow. Pointer equal is shallow. So span, which is a pointer plus a length, should it be shallow and say 2 spans are equal if they point to the same elements, or 2 spans should be equal if the elements they point to are equal. And either one can make sense, but the chance of people mixing them up is high. And I probably should have done a better job at pushing what I wanted, which is basically to rename span and decide what, because this is the fundamental. It happens in code all the time, and it happens sometimes in the committee as well. Is you have a type or a class, and you don't actually know what the essence of the class is. You don't know what this class is yet. And span is like, well, sometimes it works this way. It works kind of like the elements. And sometimes over here, when you do assignment or when you do consts, something like that, it works like a pointer. Because a const span, like a const shared pointer, means you can't change the shared pointer. Well, you can change what it points to. A shared pointer to const, you can't change what it points to. Span, in that way, is shallow const. A const span, you can't change the span, you can't change where it points to, but you can change the elements, because it's not a span over const elements, it's a const span over writable elements. Whereas a const vector, the iterator you get back, it maintains the constness. Vector's constness is deep. Span's constness is shallow. So they wanted a shallow const, but a deep equal. They wanted it to compare the elements as if it owned them. So I almost don't care which way you go, is just like be consistent about it. And if we had named span spanning pointer, everyone would think, oh, this works like a pointer, everything's going to be shallow, I know how it works. If we named it spanning ref, everyone would be like, oh, references, those are a bit weird, right? Because they just are. And I expect this to work like it's a reference to the elements. And then, you could even have both classes if you wanted, but you would know. And then from there, and once you get the right name, any further questions that come up, the questions are easily answered, because you can go back to it's like, well, the essence of this class is it's a spanning pointer. It works like a pointer that knows its length. Or it's a spanning reference. It works like the elements. It works as if it owned them, even though it doesn't, or something like that. If you can make a one-sentence description of the class, and we had the same problem with string view or something like that. You put it out, and then 3 years later, someone comes back with a bug report or a question of like, what happens when you pass null into its constructor? And then the committee spent, that was a huge committee group meeting in one evening. So you got 100 people in one room. Like, what was the cost of that to discuss this one thing about null? And it's like, well, if we had understood what it was we were making, and we understood the essence of what it really is, the question would be answered. We'd be like, here's the thing that this really models, and therefore this is what you get. And we have the same problem with optional. Optional can model a container of one or zero elements. It can model a type T with one extra state. It's T plus a extra value, or it can model deferred construction. It's like, hey, there's nothing here yet. Oh, now it exists. It can model it has at least 3 or 4 different models. And when you make a class that has more than one model, you are in trouble. So, and some things can be. It's not that all models should be disjoint completely. You can have in the sense of C++ concepts, you'll obviously have things that model more than one concept. But when you're thinking of what is the design model for this class, it should be very clear and should be one thing. And it shouldn't be like, well, we can use this class 5 different ways. It's like, well, that makes it useful, but it also just makes it confusing and ambiguous as to, and even if you think, oh, we've answered all the questions we have, and it models an A, and it also models a B, and it models a C, someone along the way later on is going to be like, oh, for this new thing we introduced, A does this and B does that and C does that. Oh, what happens to this thing that models all 3? It has to now pick one. It has to pick its favorite model. And then we're like, oh, and then we're going to argue about it. It's like, well, we didn't know what it was to start with. So that is my general complaint with the whole committee and most of programming is people don't know what they're doing. Is that a good? Let me just. Sometimes we don't know what the essence of the thing we're writing is, which goes back to why I stop and think before I code. And it doesn't. I mean, it's not to say anyone. Not that I have the right answer for any of these things, or that it's actually a hard problem. It should be an easy thing. It's like, hey, you're writing a class that does the file class or projector. I work with projectors. Projector class. How hard can it be? And then you realize, oh, this is really hard to get it right. So this is why we get paid the medium bucks.
You reminded me of back around C++ 17. There was some discussion about providing begin and end for optional. I don't even think it was in the committee. I don't know if it was or not. Because of the comment that you made that it can model a container of 0 to 1 elements. Just, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's, I understand, I think I understand why that can be useful. And among other things, you can make a really nice looking for loop that, especially using the new ranged for stuff. Right. So it's a for loop that only runs 0 or 1 time, right? And it pulls the element out. Inside the for loop, you now have the element, the thing that's inside the optional. Or the for loop doesn't run at all, and you fall out of the optional was empty, you don't do the for loop. Right. Which is really nice, but I don't like a for loop that doesn't actually loop. And it's not like, well, if I've got a vector 1 element, that also doesn't loop. It's like, no, this is never going to loop. We're using the for statement because we're missing the right thing. So I wonder if we basically need in the language better support for things like optional. Yeah. The scary word monad, it would be the word to throw around, but I'll try to avoid it. Ben's not here to save us. But I was writing like we have variant, we have optional, and we're talking about doing a standard expected, which will be either a value or an excuse for why you didn't have the value. And it's, it holds one or the other. It's basically a variant of two elements, but it's biased to the expected value, right? The error should be the unexpected. And we're talking about how that syntax should be, and I needed this class myself finally for stuff I'm doing at work, just where I have a queue. If you do a queue that's thread safe, you can't do front. To call front on a queue, you have to first check if it's not empty, and then you call front, and then you call pop as a separate. They're all separate operations, right?
Right.
A thread safe queue, that's got to be one operation, because you can't call, hey, are you empty? And it says no, and then you take the first element. It's like, well, between those two steps, it could have become empty after you asked. So you have to make it an atomic operation. So my queue, you say, give me the top element, and it returns either the element or an error saying there is no top element, or there's nothing in the queue. Queue's empty. So it returns an expected. I expect an element, otherwise an empty. Kind of like a variant of element or empty state, or an optional. Could have returned an optional. So I went off and started writing my version of expected, and I ended up writing a version of a class called either, which is an expected that doesn't have a bias between A and B. It's like a variant, but for only two types. And all the way through doing this, I'm trying to think, well, what should should I convert automatically to the underlying type? Should assignment just work? Should things just work? I came to the conclusion that the language isn't helping me, and probably not until we get pattern matching into the language will we shouldn't. I'm almost tempted to say we shouldn't standardize standard expected. I mean, standard expected isn't too hard, because like just do everything the same as variant and optional, but right. It's almost like we shouldn't have defined any of those things until we had pattern matching, because once we know what the syntax for pattern matching is, then it's going to change what our API for variant and optional and expected should look like. So I heard you guys wanted to ask me about some other line in the standard.
Yeah, someone cued us into this here, saying that you were responsible for this line in the containers portion. Yeah,
it's actually funny that in that section of the standard was explained all the containers and recommended standard vector as the container of choice, and that's always been there since who knows how long, probably forever. And it was not a note. It was whatever they call the rest of the main part of the standard. No. It's like what's the word for that?
I don't know. Standardese.
Yeah, but it means it's right. It has a note is not what's the word for that?
The body.
Yeah, but a note has no
canon?
Real meaning, right? Yeah, it's almost like saying canon, but there's a committee term for it, right? But a note doesn't like a compiler can ignore a note. A note is not canon, right? It is not part of the standard.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't think of the right word. But this thing saying vector is the best container and everything was like, no, it's right in the legalese of the standard. And then I was like, it probably shouldn't be. And it wasn't even my idea to change that. Because, I know nothing about how this changed, but it does now rhyme like Dr. Seuss in that part of the standard. And I assume that has nothing to do with a talk where I rhymed like Dr. Seuss. Pure coincidence. I claim no knowledge. And if there happens to be slides that have the exact same wording as what showed up in the standard, and why do I happen to know it by heart? Remember, when choosing a container, remember vector is best. Leave a comment if you choose one from the rest. I have nothing to do with that. It's
great.
Wasn't. I mean, I didn't want to tell anyone that it was in there until it's kind of scary now because the standard still isn't, C++20 isn't official yet.
Right.
But there's no way the committee is going to say no to it because that would just be, I mean, there's no signs that anyone dislikes C++20, and it would be quite a thing we've gone through the first level of voting and all this other stuff. Like, it would just be, insane for a country now to go, hey, I don't like this.
Because it rhymes.
But I've been trying to be really quiet to make sure that wording was in there before someone had a chance to say, we should take this out because, we shouldn't have poems in the standard or something. But it's not the only poem in there. It's just, and it's only 2 lines. But the best part is it wasn't put in through a paper or anything. It's a editorial fix, right? You can fix editorial things, and maybe I should try not to blame who let that through, but you only need to talk to the editors because it's not. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Right? It's not standard. It's a non-standard part of if it's just a note, and it's not a change to the language, right?
Right.
It's just like, oh, you should have used these words because they're better words. It means the same thing. Then the editors of of our standard can change that without going through the committee. Shh! Don't tell anyone.
There is a sentence right before that says array should be used when the container has a fixed size node during translation, which I'm totally on board with. Which makes me then question: is vector the best container?
I think so. I mean, Bjarne has done some slides and talks before where he shows the performance of vector over all the other containers.
Even over array, though, is what
Oh,
I'm
well, yeah,
questioning.
Sure. Array is the best if I don't know if there's a real difference. I guess there is. Array's good if you know the size. But then that means you had to think. Like, it's just like, I just take vector. I mean, they're both the best because it's contiguous and everything's in the cache, and people are all about performance, and vector just turns out to be better performance. And even if you're doing some inserts and all these other things, one of the first classes I always write in a new code base is a sorted vector class that just maintains the sort, and it's faster than set or map.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, that's why. There are times that vector isn't the best container, and in theory, there's times when list is the best container, although haven't found it yet. If you use a different container than vector, you should put a comment saying. I mean, map is kind of obvious as well on hash map or unordered map, but you should leave a comment. Why, if you're using standard list and you didn't leave a comment saying why you use standard list, I'm going to question your code, right? But if you leave a comment that says, well, I need standard list because it maintains iterators when you add and delete, or has stable iterators, which I still think is fragile and scary, but it could be a valid reason. And that actually, I use this now as a guideline for all kinds of places in code. Anytime, your team, every code base you work on has certain patterns that they use, and you could argue this is a good or but some patterns you like better than others, but for a lot of it, it's like, yeah, sure, this is a fine pattern. It's the one our team uses, unless it's actually a known bad pattern. It's like, it's fine. Our team uses this pattern. And in the case where you decide not to use the pattern, you need to leave a comment, because I'm going to be like, why did you go, why are you doing it B when we always do it A? So, and maybe there's a reason. So if there's a reason, leave a comment. If there's not a reason, just do what we do in Rome, kind of thing. So
the first C++ code base that I was paid to work on had the standard of list is our default container for everything.
Yeah.
I wish I could go back to that code base today.
Yeah. I saw a code base too where they didn't trust, and I understand why in some places you don't want to use standard containers and everything, but I saw a code base that didn't trust standard vector. because it's a template and blah, all these, it's going to be slow and all this stuff. And instead, they wrote their own kind of vector thing that allocated every element and stuck them in an array, but then allocated, like, it was really weird. And it's like each element was out. I'm like, there's no way this is faster. Like, you realize you made something worse. And you have this headache of trying to track who is supposed to free these elements. And it's just, yeah, so it happens.
Wow.
This is why we get to go and fix people's code. That's the scary part is that, the world keeps running. Like, so much code is, it works. I have a separation between code that works and code that's correct. There's a lot of code that works. It might not be correct, but it still works. So it's like, this will have a bug if you ever run into this case, but if you don't run into it, actually the code base I work on, I know it has memory leaks, and I know it has, I don't know any code base that doesn't have bugs in it. But the program that I work on is for setting up projectors and aligning them, and we do projector mapping across, if you stick 50 projectors on a building, I will seam it together into one big image. But that code only has to run for an hour or something, and then we upload the answers to the projectors, and then my code stops running. And then you can, run your show for the next 2 weeks, and it stays aligned or whatever, right? I can have memory leaks because my code will never run long enough that you'll notice a memory leak, right? I still don't like having a memory leak, but its priority has suddenly gone down. And for a long time, I'm like, how can we live with this? It's just like feels bad. And I'm like, I fix them as I find them, but I don't go searching for them anymore because I know there's one here somewhere, but we've got lots of memory and it'll never be a problem. So like the code works even if it has a bug, and the memory leak doesn't crash. Like delete a use after delete, is a worse bug than just don't delete it. Right? It's not a good way of fixing use after delete bugs, but
You heard it here. Tony says remove all the deletes from your code.
Yeah. Just tell the user to buy more memory. Like, it's cheap.
Going back to something you mentioned in the show notes, there's going to be a C++ meeting in November. There was supposed to be one in a little over a month. Is the committee making any plans to account for the, canceled Verna meeting? Are you going to be doing anything online or virtually?
Yeah, the committee is actually pretty, I don't know what the word is, pretty gung-ho or something. We're having meetings like twice a week, and that's like just the library group is having meetings twice a week, and the evolution group is having meetings twice a week, and there's probably like 6 or 7 1 hour and a half meetings going on every week between now and meeting in person. And it somehow works out to a similar number of hours as if we had met for a week, in person. But I can't keep up to it. And we can't win either way. Like some people were complaining, it's like, that's too many meetings. I'm going to miss out on stuff. But the standard, it's also too big to keep track of. There's too many features going on to keep track of it all. So you have to just trust other people to, okay, I'm not going to be at this, and I trust you guys will make a good decision, whether I do or not. But, and we've, in the meetings, the virtual meetings we're having now are not, nothing's definitive until it goes out the door, but the meetings we're having now are not in any way final votes on anything. They're just, let's make some progress and give people feedback on their papers. And then when we meet in person, we'll go over it all again, but hopefully everything will be more polished because we've gone over it once before. So yeah, we're definitely trying to keep moving. The committee is on a three-year schedule, and we plan on releasing in 3 years. That's the schedule. It might mean we have slightly less than we wanted to, but we might just keep going on pace. I think there's a lot of, like, people often ask, do we need face-to-face meetings? And I still think, yes, we do. There's a lot of value that we can't get done. It's a lot easier to get things done face-to-face. There's a lot of downsides to face-to-face meetings. It means a lot of people can't show up for various reasons. It's kind of self-selective, which is bad. Yeah. But it does get things done, and there's a lot of value in them. So we'll probably still keep doing them. But yeah, we've got this mix. And the Varna one in particular is kind of funny because you guys might know Peter Dimov. He's a big Boost contributor. He's also he originally wrote Shared Pointer. And so he's written a bunch of stuff that's shown up in the standard, and he is on all the standard emails, but he never shows up to meetings. You can be a productive member of the committee and not show up to physical meetings. But he is in Bulgaria. And I remember at one time years ago saying, we're just going to show up to you because you don't come to us, we will come to you. And then it actually started turning out, it's like, we're going to go to Varna and Peter will be there because he's in that area. And we'll force him to actually show up in person. And then it gets canceled. So I don't know. What can you do? There's also really sad. There was a bet when concepts almost made it into C++ 17, and then they got pulled out, and then they're going to show up for 20. When they got pulled out of 17, various people had friendly bets of when will concepts actually make it into the standard. And being the whatever kind of guy I am, I said 21 because just to troll the committee. And now I have this sick hope of this whole COVID virus not slowing down, because C++ 20, as far as we're concerned, is done. But maybe technically ISO won't be able to publish it until 21. So I still have this chance of because I think we did this once before, that one of our years, we voted it in the right year and then it technically published the next year kind of thing, but we still label it 14 and 17 or whatever. So even if it publishes in 21, we're still going to label it 20 because we were done and we voted it in 20. But I'm kind of secretly hoping that ISO has, technical difficulties and it publishes in 21, and don't tell Herb I said this.
Okay. Well, it's been great having you on the show again, Tony.
Yeah, it's fun. Anytime.